Excellent. It's great to see everyone here. Welcome to my class, Glenn's class, students. It's really a big night. Good evening. I'm David Belasco. On behalf of the USC Performance Science Institute at the Marshall School of Business, it is our pleasure to welcome you to our discussion with adventure athlete and rock climber Alex Honnold. I like it. I'm fired up. Are you guys fired up? I'm fired up. Fired up and a little nervous. Little nervous that, seeing Alex alone, clinging to the side of a mountain makes me queasy. I mean, it makes me, my legs like physically weak. What is it about humans that we all experience that fear of falling? The terror of clinging to a wall or hanging from the top of a building until our arms and body give out. Some of us seek to avoid that at all costs. Others, like Alex, move towards the fear, pushing the limits of human potential and imagination. The goal for tonight is to take what Alex has experienced and learned about mastery and goals and fear and translate them into tools that we, the ordinary folks, can use and apply in our lives. Before we begin, I wanted to give you some quick background on the Performance Science Institute so you can understand why Alex is just a uniquely perfect fit tonight. The USC Performance Science Institute was created to teach, train, and research the science and applied processes of high-performance mindset. In basic terms, we train the mind to perform under pressure in any domain. And it's not just for athletes, it's for everyone. So what does that mean? We teach students the science, applied processes, tools, and frameworks to access and sustain a high-performance mindset. Where other courses and schools focus on skill set, we focus on the mind because, after all, in life, what holds you back more, your skills or your mind? The end goal is for USC students to have a competitive advantage in their careers and live better lives. Isn't that what we all want? And with leading programs in business, entrepreneurship, engineering, technology, cinema, music, the arts, and the most storied athletic heritage in NCAA sports, USC is uniquely positioned to lead in this emerging field. So far, we've created a new minor in performance science with courses spanning psychology, neuroscience, biology, physiology, and business. Our capstone course is Dr. Fox's The Science of Peak Performance, in which he teaches the science of gratitude, mindfulness, grit, optimism, calm, confidence, focus, essentially how to regulate your mind under duress. Sounds like a theme for tonight. PSI is building internal partnerships across USC and external projects with the Marine Corps in Pendleton, companies, and professional sports. And while you're looking at some of those partnerships, you'll notice in the center, we've built a great partnership with USC Athletics. I know some of the staff is here from Student Athletic Academic Services, from recruiting, big week for recruiting, National Signing Day next Wednesday. And leading the sports psychology group at USC is Dr. Robin Schofield. Robin, please stand up and be acknowledged. Robin. There she is. Robin in the one seat that isn't covered by the light. Nice. No, it's great to have her here. Most meaningfully, the Institute offers scholarships to high-performing USC students in any field. This year, we awarded scholarships to dancers, a jazz pianist, an emerging entrepreneur, a recon Marine, and the best women's beach volleyball player in America. We also established the Jake Olson Vision Award for students who have overcome significant personal challenges to attend and excel at USC. You can learn more about and apply for scholarships at the website of the Performance Science Institute. Finally, in conjunction with my class, Taking the Leap, we host events with outliers and thought leaders. Anyone we believe can give you tools, philosophies, and expertise to strengthen your mindset, we invite them to USC. It started with entrepreneurs, but has grown to include people from all fields and industries. We launched in November with one of my favorites of all time, Dr. Brene Brown. Oh, she was so good. An expert on courage, belonging, vulnerability, and shame. Last Friday, we welcomed Arianna Huffington, entrepreneur and wellness champion and founder of the Huffington Post. Later this semester, we welcome the founders of Riot Games, the founders of SoulCycle. Our co-founder, Professor Pete Carroll, will be coming. And on April 2nd, Kobe Bryant is here to teach his competitive philosophy for the first time at USC. Now, I know what you're saying, if you're not in this class, how do I get to see these people? It's pretty simple. Take the classes, take the major, and then follow the Performance Science Institute on Facebook, Twitter, and soon to be Instagram. So a lot of things coming up. Stay tuned, because I think we're adding some more speakers as well. All right, so that's our first year, and we want you to join our team and help build what we think is going to be a leader in the emerging field of performance science. All right, ready to roll? Let's get started. Like I said, queasy. Our format tonight will be a discussion on stage, followed by questions from USC students, current USC students in the audience. For the first part of the discussion on climbing and science, Dr. Glenn Fox will interview Alex. Dr. Fox is a neuroscientist and published expert on the neural correlates of emotion in the brain. That means he will put you in an fMRI machine, stimulate different emotional states, and observe how your brain and body react. And then he will write about it. For the second part, we want to do a deeper dive into psychology and mindset. And we're really lucky to have a great partner in Dr. Michael Gervais, a leading high-stakes sports psychologist. Dr. Gervais works with athletes and performers on the world stage, like Felix Baumgartner, who jumped from space in the Red Bull Stratus project, Olympians Kerry Walsh Jennings and April Ross, and the Seattle Seahawks. When we created the Performance Science Institute and brainstormed on whom we'd like to invite to USC, I asked Glenn Fox, if you could have anyone in the world come and speak at the Performance Science Institute, who would it be? His answer, Alex Honnold. This is a big night. Please welcome the head of Design, Strategy, and Outreach for the Performance Science Institute, Dr. Glenn Fox.
Thank you. Awesome. How are my students doing? All right. Are you meditating? I told you to meditate. I hope so. All right. So what are we doing here? Well, it's harder than you think to answer the question of why we do what we do. Consider tonight why you may have sat in that particular seat or why you may have chosen that particular outfit. Suffice it to say, the answer to the question of why we do what we do, especially when we're taking on the hardest challenges, lies beneath layer upon layer of reasoning and feeling. That's simply how the brain works. For someone like Alex Honnold, world famous for his ability to solo rock climb, that is, to climb without a rope, and for his multi-day climbs called link-ups, in which he traverses a range of connected, jagged peaks or completes multiple 2,000-foot climbs in a day, I'm not so sure that asking why he does it is really the right way to frame the discussion. So Alex is known for his authentic, no-big-deal demeanor. In fact, his nickname is Alex No Big Deal Honnold. Interviewers constantly remark about his calm and his unaffected manner. He often seems even a bit puzzled as to why his perspective or achievements are of so much interest to other people. Alex, now I think 32, grew up outside of Sacramento and began climbing when his parents took him to a climbing gym, just as a way to pass the time. But he took to it in a big way. Climbing quickly became his major focus, his escape, and his passion. His interest in free soloing extends to his earliest days as a climber. He felt at the time maybe even a little too shy at times to approach other climbers and to rope up and join their teams. So he would simply instead just climb the routes on his own. And so he began this path that we're able to join him on tonight, where he began to look at what it would take to master the mental and physical skills necessary for climbing at this level. When we get to know people like Alex, whose paths extend so far from ordinary, we are left feeling awe and wonderment about how such things are possible. The question of why, then, is insufficient. Perhaps more importantly, it doesn't really tell us the key lessons we need to stretch our own boundaries for how we can think of our biggest goals and take the steps we need to reach them. Tonight, we aim to learn how Alex trains his body, his craft, and maybe most importantly, his mind. And that's why we've brought 2 PhDs to understand one climber. So I'm here to focus on understanding Alex's craft, his biology, literally, we'll talk about his brain, my favorite, and his personality, and we're going to discuss his recent free solo project in which he climbed ropeless El Capitan in Yosemite. I'll then pass the baton, and we'll be in the hands of Dr. Michael Gervais, who will take over to uncover Alex's most prized asset, his mind. Along the way, we aim to translate Alex's approach and distinction into our everyday lives and workplaces. So as a manner of introduction, let's enjoy this video of our guest. Great, and now it's my honor. Let's welcome Alex Honnold.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Hello,
That's a good
everybody.
introduction.
Yeah, thanks.
So thanks so much for coming out. And I got to start with some hard questions. How's the van running?
Really well. Actually, I moved up to a better van now.
All right.
After 9 years in that van that you saw in the video, I got sick of not being able to stand up, so I bought a full-size van.
Nice.
It's pretty exciting. Yeah. But
That's awesome. Well, I'm a mechanic, so if you run into anything, just let me know.
I will.
That's awesome. So I saw that you just got back from Antarctica. Can you share a little bit? Like, what are you up to? What was happening on that project?
So Antarctica was, I was just in Antarctica for several weeks. It was a six-week expedition, but we were actually in our base camp for 2.5, 3 weeks. But it was a North Face expedition to go climb a series of mountains in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica. But it was cool. It was a big adventure. It's very different than what we just saw in the videos and most of the things that I normally care about personally in rock climbing, which are more of the big soloing objectives and performance climbing. This was like pure adventure climbing, going somewhere at the very edge of the earth and climbing very bad rock and in marginal conditions. So it was more about the exploration, the adventure. It's like a totally different thing than going up on walls by yourself.
That's awesome. I would love to talk more in a moment about the projects that you're taking on and how you've evolved the things that you want to do climbing-wise. Can we rewind and start a little bit at the beginning? We know you began climbing in a gym and focusing much of your time in Yosemite. Was there kind of a point you realized that climbing was going to be like your main passion? Was there a point where you're like, I can't breathe without climbing?
No, I mean, there was never a moment where I decided, now I'm going to climb for the rest of my life, but it's just that every day I wake up and I'm like, I want to go climbing. It's a pretty, I've just always liked climbing more than everything else. But, well, I mean, people ask, like, when did you decide you wanted to be a professional or that you were going to be a climber? And it's like, I've never decided that I'm going to be a climber. I just go climb more than I do everything else. Yeah,
I tell the students, find the thing that you can't go to sleep at night unless you think about it, that it keeps you up at night with enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, I've wanted to go climbing 5+ days a week for the last 20 years, and I still want to just as much, so I'll go tomorrow morning. But,
that's perfect. Yeah. So then you started off, you were working in the gym and doing this stuff, so how did you start taking on kind of these bigger and bigger challenges, and how are we now at this place where you're thinking about what projects you want to take on and what's motivating some of the stuff you're trying to do at the moment?
Honestly, I feel like you should tell me. I mean, you're the one that studies. I'm like, I don't know. I came here to, attend a lecture. I'm ready to learn from you guys.
I know, and Dave told me, hey, can you say a few words to my class tonight? Well, here we are. So,
I'm just here to listen, but
Yeah, we're all freestyling at the moment. So actually, let's unwind a little bit. So if you're choosing, maybe the question is to talk about creativity a little bit, right? So there's a lot of ways to climb a mountain. There's a lot of routes you can take, and to what degree, if you've ever thought about it, how is climbing kind of a creative outlet for you?
yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, so I don't think of myself as a very creative person. Like, in the traditional sense of the arts, I'm terrible at music or drawing or anything artistic, really. But I do think that climbing has a certain artistic, maybe the vision involved in imagining something that people haven't imagined before, or imagining doing something in a different way. Or even, you mentioned link-ups, like big enchainments of several peaks in a row, like traversing across a mountain range. A lot of the things like that I've done, people have climbed the individual peaks, but they've done them in, many days on each one, and having the vision to think, well, we may as well just do them all at once, because by taking less gear, we can climb faster, and that allows us to do all of them without stopping. And I mean, there is, I hate to call that creativity, but there is something to it.
It's definitely creativity.
There's something original to it, I guess, which is.
Yeah, well, seeing a different way, I mean, rock climbers will talk about the aesthetics of a climb.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you mean? What do they mean when they say the aesthetics of a climb?
Some mountains are just beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty fundamental human attribute, though. Like, some mountains have really nice symmetry, or they're really, slender spires, or some things are just beautiful for your mind.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'm thinking of like the Matterhorn, a perfectly shaped mountain that just when you think of a mountain, it's just what comes to mind. So you're like, oh, it's just something that calls out to be climbed.
Right.
Or something like El Capitan, which is perfect white rock, glistening, beautiful, sheer, and nicely tapered on both sides. You're just like, oh, what a nice piece of rock. I don't know if anyone else looks at rocks that way.
I think I feel like I understand. I mean, we talk about awe, right? There's a whole science of awe that there's something about these scales, these things that we look up and it dwarfs our own perspective.
Yeah, it puts the human experience into a tiny little, puts everything in perspective. And I think Yosemite Valley has that, in spades. Like it's just, anywhere you look in Yosemite just puts you back in your place.
Yeah, when you come into the valley and everywhere you look, Half Dome, you have just such a world-class mecca for, for feeling awe. I mean, it's
everything
the
is
best
so
place.
big, it's just magnificent.
Yeah.
Kind of like this venue, actually.
Yeah. Well, natural things can have awe, or man-made things can have awe-inducing perspectives as well.
Didn't you say this was built as a church? I mean,
it was.
Big cathedrals are designed to inspire awe in the same way. It's like the big, sweeping, epic. I mean, it's the same idea.
Yeah, it's the same. It's actually the same aesthetic, so to speak. Yeah. So.
But this is not quite as cool as El Cap.
No, we could be so lucky. Next semester we'll host at El Cap or Camp 4.
If we did this in the meadow, that would be really inspiring.
Yeah, we'll do it.
You could project it onto the wall.
We should. All right. Where's Dave Velasco?
Yeah.
We're gonna mark that down. That's awesome. So one of the quotes I'm hoping. So when you pick these projects, is there a feeling that's driving like the scale of the project? Like, if you're thinking about some of these link-ups, what's underneath it? Are you thinking just about the enthusiasm for it or the challenge, or do you feel even some anxiety when you pick a project that maybe feels a little hairy?
So I actually typically have chosen, so it might not seem like it from just reading my resume or seeing like YouTube videos and highlight reel stuff, but I actually have typically chosen sort of attainable, smaller scale projects. I normally choose something that's a little bit harder than what I've done before, but something that, and I've actually, I've had friends criticize me for not thinking big enough, because each season I sort of choose something that's just a little bit harder. Right. So I've been going to Yosemite every year basically for 10 years, and so that means 2 seasons a year, so that's 20 trips to Yosemite, roughly. A few less, but I've missed a few. But so say that's 16 trips to Yosemite where each time you just make incremental improvement. Each time you try something a little bit harder, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, or whatever. And after 16 trips, eventually you climb El Cap.
Yeah.
Or whatever else.
Well, with a little mindset training as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that in a minute. So actually, that's a good transition. So I came across an article in which you had your brain scanned by a group in South Carolina, right? So we have the images.
Oh, yeah.
We'll explain these in a moment. But Do you recognize these?
Oh, yeah.
So can you, what happened?
That's my brain.
There you are, it's your brain. Yeah. Only at USC we have your brain up when you're ready to come in. So what happened? What was the setup? What did they run you through? I mean, I know a little bit, but I'm curious for your experience of this.
I mean, so the long version of the story is basically that a climber/writer had approached me wanting to write a profile about me for a science magazine, and he thought it would be interesting to dive deeper into the brain. He'd heard a quote that somebody was saying, that guy's missing his amygdala. And he was like, I wonder if he is missing his amygdala. And he thought, like, that would be an interesting way to start a profile. And he was a climber, and he understood the whole sport. And so he found a researcher basically working in South Carolina that was willing to look at my brain. And that's what we got. So,
that's what you got?
Yeah, so I went into an fMRI, and I mean, I suppose it's all standard. She was showing me images and scanning my brain, and not much happened.
Well, it's interesting. So what kind of images? What images did they show you? Do you remember?
Well, so it was some kind of standard test. She's been doing a lot of research with high sensation-seeking individuals, and so it was some standard battery of images that she uses for all of her research. But it was the whole spectrum. You know, some would be a beautiful mountain, some would be neutral, like I don't know, a shoe or something, just totally benign, or an electrical socket or something. And then some would be, you know, a baby on fire, or like, you know, somebody holding a gun pointed at you, or like all kinds of horrible images too. But the full spectrum of beautiful to terrible to, you know, pornographic to disturbing, whatever.
Right.
But they're all just black and whitish. Actually, maybe they were colored, but they felt very dated. They felt old, and they're just pictures. I was like,
yeah. So that actually fits kind of can I try something on you? So
yeah.
I have a hypothesis for this, of course.
Yeah.
And
that's why I'm here.
Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I think. I think so. Just from studying your interviews and your perspective on things, I think that you really do think differently than most people. So that'd be obvious. Let me unpack. So, fMRI research, oftentimes one of the limits is you're in this tube, you're bound up, you can't move your head. It's cold and it's noisy, and they're showing you these images. And it's a huge challenge in fMRI research to create real feelings. Mm-hmm. And luckily, you know, when you involve people in the scan, a lot of times they just kind of play along, and it's good. That's how we get some of the data. They kind of understand, like, oh, okay, this is a fear stimuli. I'll kind of let myself into it. Mm-hmm. And I think what you did is you're always thinking a few layers ahead. So my thinking is maybe that in the right situation with the right stimuli, you would have the same amygdala activity as any person, but you're regulating emotion through. You're not even getting to the point where you're feeling fear and regulating it in the scanner. You were just like, what is this? I
was like, this is stupid. Yeah, this is just pictures. But
exactly.
But yeah, had they put a scorpion in, I'm sure I would have lit up, because I'd be like, oh my God, I'm in a sealed metal tube with a scorpion.
Right.
Like, that would be quite scary.
We can do that too.
I'm not that psyched. But I mean, that's kind of the thing, you know, real danger. Like, I'm sure I light up like anybody else.
Right.
But yeah, pictures. I mean, who cares about pictures?
That's what I think is so interesting, and but that speaks a lot to how you've led your career. It's like you just said, I'm not playing the game that people are playing a little bit, right?
Well, I mean, I like to play along, but I don't know, it seemed dumb.
Right. So that's okay. So that's my hypothesis for these results. So you see, in the control, you see those axes, see the crosshairs. The control participant was another climber, so it was another person who's used to rock climbing. It wasn't an average person, but my guess is that this person just played along. So you have that red blob, and that's the amygdala. That's the part of the brain that is probably more associated with saliency than fear, but it's often associated as really important for fear and the experience of fear. And you see in Alex's brain with the crosshairs at the same location, you don't see the same blob. And the article where I read interpreted this as he's this hyper emotion regulator, and I think Alex just has a very strong like BS detector and just wasn't into it.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know,
though actually, so the control was a guy in the lab who was a climber, and he actually said, or the researcher who I spoke to later said that he felt the same way about it. He was like, "This is dumb. It's just pictures. Like, it doesn't really matter." But his brain still lit up, you know, as normal.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that means anything, but.
Well, I mean, suffice it to say, long story short, your amygdala is probably working fine.
I think it's working great.
I think it's working great.
I feel great.
If you want to check it out, we can do that. We have it right down the hall. So, Okay, let's go back. So we have some framework. We've kind of gotten an idea of how you think about climbs and projects. And I want to spend a little bit of time going through the nuts and bolts of your recent free solo of El Capitan. So for those of you who don't know, El Cap is probably the most famous big wall in climbing.
Yeah, let's all just bask in the grandeur for a
Yes.
moment. I mean, look at that wall. That's a nice looking wall.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So I'm a Tuolumne kid. So we used to some kids ditch school to go to the mall. We just go to Yosemite. But if you haven't ever seen it, so the next image I think has 3 Empire State Buildings overlapped with it. So that's how big. So imagine climbing straight up the Empire State Building, and then someone stacks another one on it, climbing up that one, and then having another one and climbing up that one. That's the scale. It's really hard. Okay, we can put back the better picture.
Just goes to show that the Empire
Perfect.
State Building is not that tall. It's a very old
Yeah.
building. But, yeah.
That's right. That's awesome. Okay, so we have some sense. So El Cap, probably the most famous climb. Mm-hmm. Walk us through a little bit the day. Take us on a journey. What was the day?
And can I just say that, I mean, that's part of the appeal of free soloing something like that, is that I also grew up looking at walls. It is the most iconic wall in the world. It's, for me, just to climb El Cap in a day, I think 2006, I climbed it for the first time via basically straight up the center, a route called the Nose. And just to climb the Nose in a day, it took us 23 hours. It was a big, momentous event in my climbing. I was like, oh my gosh, we climbed El Cap. That's so exciting. And so El Cap has kind of always been, where the wall upon which you measure progress. As I've gotten better at climbing, trying to climb it in a day and then try to free climb it in a day, which is still using rope, and then eventually to free solo it in less than 4 hours. But
it's a moonshot. And do you still hold the speed record for El Cap?
no, I somebody else broke it just a couple months ago. So
what was it now?
It's down to 219 for the Nose, straight up the middle. But I had 223, and I think we'll actually go back in the spring and try to take it back.
Good.
But just for fun. But
Way
we'll
to
see.
compete.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a fun game. I actually really love speed climbing, but I think we've had that record for 5 or 5.5 years, and nobody's really been playing the game. And now that somebody's playing again, I'm like so excited to jump back in.
Yeah, the process of speed climbing. For those of you who don't know, it's basically, well, explain a little bit. Simul climbing.
You're climbing with 2 people. You're tied together. You're using equipment. But instead of climbing up a little bit and then stopping and bringing up your partner and then repeating the process back and forth up the wall, you're just climbing continuously. And then on a route like this, you climb basically the first half in one long section, and then you switch. By then, the person in the front has run out of gear, and the person coming behind him has taken all the, cleaned it all. So now the person in the bottom has all the gear, and then they just play through and take it to the top.
So,
but that's how you climb El Cap very fast.
That's how you climb it. And just to be clear, if one of those people falls, the other person may not be prepared for it, right?
It could be a disaster, yeah.
It could get hairy real fast.
Yeah, and the average party on El Cap spends 3 to 5 days to climb the Nose. So just to put in perspective, speed climbing it in 2 hours is a lot faster than 4 days.
That's a 3-minute mile sort of thing. I mean, that's
or it's
great.
like a 3:59 or something.
That 3:59 mile, right.
Yeah, it's really fast. It's not crazy. I don't think it's gotten that close to human performance like potential yet.
Right. Wow.
But,
wow. So walk us through a little bit of the day of your solo adventure.
I mean, I could tell you the whole thing. It's all seared in my memory. It's very exciting. But
yeah.
But basically, I just woke up very early because sunrise was about 5:30, and I had to start before sunrise, basically. I ate my normal breakfast, drove my van to the meadow, and then just strolled over to the base, and then climbed the route. I'd already
Just like you do.
I mean, so I'd already packed everything the day before. I already had my muesli out with all my stuff in it. Basically, my whole day was all set up so that I could just get out of bed and then just instantly eat, put on my backpack that already has my shoes and chalk bag. I was like, my harness. I didn't take a harness. Yeah, just my shoes, my chalk bag, and a little bit of water so I could have a sip at the base, and then I mean that was it. But the whole thing was very much on autopilot, and I was trying to cultivate that sense of autopilot so that when I wake up, I don't have to make any decisions about like what should I wear today. Everything's all laid out. I just put it on and do it. And so it was kind of the same with getting to the base of the route. There wasn't anything to think about. I just did exactly what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, and so that's a major lesson actually, right? So you set out to climb it, and you punched through the goal a little bit, right? So you finished it. What did you do after you finished the climb?
You mean hangboarding?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I
you
did my
trained.
normal afternoon training session afterward.
Right.
But yeah.
Wait, so did you guys all hear that? Climbed it and then trained.
Yeah, well, because I was on this every other day program. And,
Yeah.
And I'd rested the day before.
That's a big lesson. That's a really big lesson, honestly, because it shows that it wasn't. Well, if I can unpack and project a little, it's
you
that
tell me. Yeah.
it's that you can't just see the goal; you have to punch through it, right?
Well, actually, with LCAP specifically, I did. I even thought that quite a bit.
Yeah.
I never built it all up as I just want to climb LCAP. I was always looking past it. Actually, right after I did it, the week after, I went on this expedition to Alaska to try to climb some big walls on this glacier. And it was important to me to have goals beyond LCAP, just so that it wasn't like everything goes into LCAP. I just wanted it to be a roughly normal day of climbing in my year of climbing. You know, like the Antarctica expedition that I just came home from, that was already on my calendar. And so the week after this, I went to Alaska, and Alaska was sort of preparation for the Antarctic trip because I hadn't done anything on snow in quite a long time, and I was like, oh, this would be a good way to get current on my skis and climbing big walls on a glacier again. Yeah, so I mean, I definitely was looking past LCAP a little bit.
Right.
Even though, I mean, LCAP means more to me than, I mean, who cares about going to Alaska? It's like,
Well, we're Californians, that's true.
That's
So,
true.
yeah, that's just so important to note that it was the way you scale these things in your mind, even if it's not a matter of, you don't put the pinnacle because you never know what's going to happen.
I didn't want to put too much pressure on it. I didn't want LCAP to be built up as something more than it was.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's the interesting thing about free soloing is that physically, free soloing LCAP is easier than climbing it with a rope. Because when you climb with a rope, you have a bunch of rope drag. You have the rope basically pulling you down where the rope weighs, maybe 10 pounds. And when you have it clipped through a bunch of gear, you have all that friction. So sometimes you're pulling, say, 20 pounds behind you. And then you also have a harness on with a bunch of hardware, and then you have food and water. And because of all the extra weight, you're going slightly more slowly, and so that means you need a little bit more food. And it's kind of like this big cycle. And that whole cycle is why most people spend 4 days on the wall, because they don't think they can do it in one day because they're too slow. So then they have to take camping equipment, and that means they're even slower. So then they have to take more food to spend 3 days instead of 2. And then, it snowballs until pretty soon they go halfway and they give up and they go home.
Right.
But, I mean, honestly, it is sort of 50-50 when people try the nose for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I mean, people write, but Dan Duane, one of my favorite writers, wrote an entire book about trying to climb it once.
Yeah,
it's a good book.
And didn't climb it.
And he still didn't make it.
Yeah, and it's a great book.
It's a huge. It's really tough to put into perspective, but also important. How long did you wait to call your mom after your climb?
I don't know, sometime that afternoon.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people I had to call on the way down. I mean, certainly all the partners that had helped along the process, and call my girlfriend and stuff, and just check in with everybody that was involved in the project.
That's so cool.
Yeah. There's something I was going to say about. I lost it though.
We have plenty of time.
Yeah. We'll just keep unfurling.
So I want to, as a point of transition, I want to actually start to talk about what it takes to prepare for something and what it takes to frame the career and the challenges you've had. Can we show a picture of your hands up here? Okay.
I'm just holding my hands, yeah.
Yeah, or you can hold them. We brought his hands too.
Yeah,
so,
I brought them today.
Okay, so in the picture, to me, your left hand looks bigger than your right hand in the picture.
No, it's just the frame or something.
It's just the framing of it. Really?
Well,
I guess
I'm
it is
not going to be grossly asymmetrical. It'd be hard to climb a puzzle.
I know, it's so funny. Okay, I have to admit, because I saw this and I just thought, is one hand that much bigger than the other hand?
No, it's just taken over my shoulder or something, or some kind of. No. I mean, look, they're beautiful. They're perfect.
They are beautiful. Yeah. They have a wonderful aesthetic.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I do want to point out something. So your hands are pretty amazing devices, obviously. But for most people, so if you look closely at Alex's hands, all these pads and everything, so these are all little muscles, and every time you flex your hand, these little muscles will grow. So if you look in your knuckles, like you have it, these pads are extremely well developed.
Yeah, though,
right?
I mean, you're a doctor, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there isn't that much muscle in your hand. It's more the connective tissue, because most of the muscle that controls your hand is your forearm. So it's like, your forearms are highly developed, and then this is all like
so this stuff has just kind of gotten calloused and sort of
and connective tissue and tendons and ligaments and pulleys and all the stuff holding the structure of your hand together. But I mean, there are muscles inside like the pinching muscles for your thumb.
Like right here.
Yeah, but for the most part, this is just
that's all just like
just
holding
from
together.
getting abused, yeah.
Well, that's why I'm not a medical doctor. So
yeah, exactly.
That helps. So I actually
but certainly
think
the more you use your hands, the more worked they get. I mean, I'm probably going to have arthritis and stuff. I'm sure my joints will be destroyed, but that's all right. they've done a lot for me.
We're all cheering for them, for sure.
Thanks.
So I think that this picture and the discussion of your hands and what it's taken to build them actually raises some of the most profound questions about what it takes to do this stuff on a day-to-day basis. I think that looking at your hands and thinking of your hands as a tool actually raises as many questions as it answers, because that's your medium. That's how you work. And I think to get to where you've gone, I think we need to take the next step and start to explain a little bit about your mind and your approach and your philosophy. So with that in mind, I want to deep dive and explore a little fully, and I'd like to welcome Michael Gervais, and I will see you at the very end.
Thanks.
Sounds good?
Yeah,
Let's welcome Michael Gervais. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks.
I've been wanting to do this for a long time. So, Alex, on the drive down here, one of my friends asked and said, what do you want to explore with Alex? And I said, I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to turn you upside down and try to get the coins out of your pockets and whatever comes out of your... Yeah, that's good. I don't want to do that, because that's probably what happens in most conversations with you, is like, how do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? Which are important. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to be with you and see how this conversation unfolds.
Yeah, let's...
Yeah.
I want to be with you too.
Yeah.
No,
and for me, it's a bit like, I think we know the song, we know the orchestra tune, but being in the presence of something that's beautiful and hard to do and is rare. And when I say what's hard to do, is the way your mind works is extraordinary.
Well, it seems very ordinary to me, because it's always done that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and what I'm hopeful that we'll do is we'll explore possibly like the deeper parts of who you are, and in doing that, maybe we'll get to the dark side.
You take me on a journey. I'm ready. I'm excited. I've never cried in an interview, but this could be the first. I'm ready. But,
okay. Okay. So if we started with some really basic stuff about how you work, the assumptions are that you understand and have a command of your mind in a way that is extraordinary, and you might be, in my mind, the most significant athlete from a mental standpoint in our modern times, what you're doing and the commitment you have at what you do. So, like, if we just started with the most basic question, how have you developed the command of your own mind?
I don't know. So stepping back, I don't even know if I would say that I've developed. I guess I do have some command of my own mind, because, certainly over the last 10 years that I've been free soloing, there has been a lot of progress, and I used to be a lot more afraid of things, and certainly much more afraid of public speaking. This would have been just a complete horror show 10 years ago. But I don't know. There's been a lot of growth.
What changed in that 10 years? Like, if we can pause on that, because public speaking is one of the largest public fears.
Yeah, everybody's horrified of public speaking. So what as changed? They should be. It's terrible.
What changed?
I think practice, just doing it a lot. And same with the climbing, or even more so with the climbing, because it was more systematic. I spent more time intentionally going out and climbing lots and lots and lots of routes. But some without a rope, some with a rope, like all different combinations, but always trying something a little bit harder, a little bit bigger, a little bit, something, just constantly broadening the comfort zone a little bit. Yeah. Until now, all climbing feels pretty comfortable, except for ice climbing, which I still don't like. But,
It's an over-said phrase, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I don't think of it as being uncomfortable. I think of it as having an adventure. I love having an adventure.
Yeah.
Like my rest days, I always try to have an adventure. My point being, it's not just the big climbing days, the big climbing objectives that are trying to, like one of my last, I live in Las Vegas. A couple days ago, I was out for a mountain biking ride and got a flat tire in the middle of nowhere, and was like not willing to walk my bike back the way I'd come, and just decided to quest down this canyon that was a little bit more direct. And it wound up cliffing out, and then I wound up lowering my bike off this cliff with this old hardware store rope, and then down climbing, and it was all, I was like, this is an adventure. And then basically hopping a bunch of fences through a subdivision and carrying a bicycle, and I was like, this is an amazing urban adventure. You know, I was like, I'm having a full-on mountain experience, but in the suburbs of Las Vegas, like, this is cool. And that's kind of what I mean, you know, a rest day adventure. Like, I mean, it definitely broadened my comfort zone. I was like, oh, I'm hopping weird security fences in some gated community in Vegas carrying a mountain bike. I was like, that's cool. That's different. But I made it back to my car, and I saved myself an hour, so it was cool. But,
Where did that come from?
well, I don't know. What do you mean, the desire for adventure?
Yeah. Where did that first begin to be watered, if you will?
I don't know, maybe being raised in suburbia is just so boring.
No,
I honestly, I have no idea. I mean, just a desire to have an experience, you know?
And then, so let's unwind just a little bit. What was it like growing up? And, you know, I don't want to spend too much time there, but, you know, what was mom like? What was dad like? What was the ecosystem that you were parented by? And it's an easy question for mom, you know, like, how does she feel about what you do? But, like, what was that ecosystem like that has supported you to do what you do?
I mean, it was all pretty normal. I mean, especially being on a nice campus like this, it was all pretty, both my parents were professors teaching language at college, and, you know, it's all very middle class, normal, comfortable, pretty easy. Going to good public school and just studying and whatever until I dropped out of school and stopped. But not that you guys should. But I forgot we're at a learning institution. Yeah. Okay, but it's all pretty straightforward. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like I just as easily could have gone any other path. You know, I could have stayed in school. I could have been an engineer. You know, my big adventures could have been who knows what. Maybe, you know, I don't know what's adventurous about engineering, but I'm sure there is. But
you know, there's a way to, so I'm sure most of your interviews are around risk and risk-taking and how you have a good command of that or an understanding of it. And there's a risk to eject out of school. There's a risk to do engineering or not do engineering, right? So, like, how did you, if we just looked at that one little decision in time?
Yeah, but so at the moment, it didn't feel like a decision. I wasn't deciding I'm not going to go to school anymore.
Okay, yeah.
It was kind of this interesting moment. Actually, my father died that summer, and so that was part of the pressure for going to school and everything. But I'd also gotten second at Youth National, so I was invited to the Youth World Cup, whatever. And so, like an international competition that was during the semester. So it was basically all a good excuse to take the semester off, go climbing, do this thing in Europe. And so it didn't feel like, now I'm never going to go to school again. It was more like, oh, I'm going to take the fall semester off to, you know, go do this climbing competition and just, you know, live. And then I just took the next, you know, 20 semesters off, or 22. But I'm still planning on going back. Someday, when I'm 60 or 70. But my point is just that, I mean, and people also ask that, when did you decide to be a climber, or when, you know, when you decide to drop out of school? And it never really felt like a decision. It was more just sort of this, you know, in hindsight, it looks like a very clear path where it's like, oh, I just went climbing. But in the moment, it all just felt pretty haphazard. Like, oh, now I'm going to go climb for a bit, and now I'm going to go somewhere else and climb for a bit. And then you look back and you're like, oh, I've spent the last 5 years doing nothing but climb. You're like, huh.
Okay, so that's a very different understanding, I think, of like, I've got goals, I've got, you know, strategies that I'm going to line up for those goals, and then I meet those objectives. Like, that's a very different way of understanding how you've become great. And so, are you more goal-oriented or more fluid, where you're following the next bit of breadcrumbs that are in front of you?
I don't know. I mean, actually, some of my girlfriend says sometimes, like, strong goals loosely held. You know, like, I have very strong, like, oh, I want to do this, this, and this. But if I don't wind up trying 2 of them and I only do 1 of them, like, that's fine. Like, great year, that was fine, no problem. I mean, I have journals and to-do lists and goals and things like that going back to 2005. I have a climbing journal of everything I've climbed since 2005. And so, you know, I can go back and look through that stuff, and in any given season, like, you know, 2009, I'm going to do these routes, and they're all listed out, and I do, you know, maybe a third of them. And I'm like, that's pretty good. You know, it's like, it's good enough. I think that's kind of, you know, I do have strong goals. But the thing, especially with climbing, is a lot of them depend on the weather, a lot of them depend on travel, like going to exotic places to climb some specific route. And if I wind up not having an opportunity to go to that place, or something else comes up, I'm like, that's fine. You know, another year, something will happen. But,
are you more principle-based or driven-based or goal-based?
I don't know.
Yeah. So goals like, I want to do these things. Principles are, the way I would understand them, like, these are the things that I live by.
I don't know. I mean, within climbing, my overarching principle has always been, as long as I'm getting better at climbing, then it's all good. You know, like, even if I don't do the goals on my list, as long as I've improved as a climber or feel like a better climber, then that's more important than doing any of the things on the list. Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess that's kind of a principle, or, you know, like a value, like learning, improving. Because ultimately, the goals don't totally matter. I mean, you can swap in one rock for, I mean, you know, like El Cap means a lot to me, and I do think it's the most important wall in the world. But I mean, it's still a rock. I mean, there are a lot of rocks on Earth. You know? But, yeah.
Okay. I don't want to be insensitive with this question.
I'm excited.
Yeah, but it's coming. And I didn't want to ask it. Like, I got nervous to ask it when you asked about spoke about your dad. And so I kind of BS my way through a little bit to get to this question, which is, you know, what is your relationship with death? And maybe you could talk about your relationship with how you move through the grief process, or moving through the grief process still with your father. And I don't want to be insensitive, but I do want to understand your relationship with life and death.
Yeah, so actually, so my father died when I was 19, and actually in the few years before, or maybe the year after, but both my grandfathers had died as well. And so it was just kind of a lot of heavy, you know, family, all sort of at the end of high school. And I mean, I don't know how much that, I think the main thing that I take away from that is just it's a reminder that life is short and you need to do the things that you want to do. And I think especially at that time in my life, I mean, you know, I was slightly younger than most of the students here, but it was just, you know, a reminder that you don't have forever. And so, you know, I should do the things that I want to do. I think that's probably the biggest, you know, lesson or whatever I've taken from all that. But the thing, I mean, climbing is just fundamentally a dangerous sport. Like, I've had a lot of friends die now in various accidents, and actually this last year has been particularly grim. And so, I mean, you're just kind of constantly reminded. And each time something like that happens, you know, you sort of reevaluate, reassess, am I doing the right thing with my life? Am I doing what I want to be doing? Am I making the right decisions? You know, am I on track? But I mean, I think that's important. I think, you know, it's good to sort of reassess every once in a while.
You've lost two important people, at least two that I know of, in the last couple of years that...
You mean, yeah, well-known climbers?
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, I mean, so like Uwe Steck was a really famous Swiss alpinist. He died last summer, but or last spring on Everest, on Nupse, but same thing. But other than him, like 5 or 6 people in the community have died recently. And then so randomly, the day before I went to Antarctica, we witnessed a fatality in my local sport climbing crag, basically right next to us. And in my 20 years of climbing, it's the first time I've seen somebody just die at the crag right there. And that's pretty heavy. I mean, it's a reminder that how fragile the human body is, really. It was definitely not what I needed to see, right? Well, I mean, I'm actually sort of okay with it because, you know, I spent 20 years thinking about the risks and visualizing what it'd be like to fall to my death if I slipped off something like this. And I mean, it's not, you know, I kind of understand that, but certainly for my girlfriend to just like see somebody die at the crag, she's only been climbing 2 years, like she did not need to see that. You know, it was a bit much. But
yeah. Okay, so, and again, I don't want to be callous, but when somebody dies, I asked a friend about, he's an adventure athlete that's extraordinary at what he does, and I said, what's the lifespan for folks in your craft? And he's a base jumper. And he said about 5 or 6 years. And okay, so not to be insensitive, but there's another part to that, which is when somebody dies, and he didn't say this, but this is a thought I have. When somebody dies in what you do, then it makes it alive. It reminds you of how dangerous it is and how extraordinary what you do. Is that confusing, or is that accurate, first of all?
I think that's that's exactly what I meant by reassessing, thinking about your life. I think that's definitely accurate.
Yeah.
But I think that I personally don't necessarily need people to die all the time to remind me, because I think just the nature of what I'm doing, I am constantly reflecting on that.
So how do you move through the grief process? It's hard, right, for most people. And is it hard for you?
It's not super hard for me, honestly. It's I don't know. I mean, I just see it as it's all just part of the natural cycle. You know, I mean, everybody's going to die, and as long as somebody, I think more about whether somebody had a good life. Actually, I mean, if we really want to get dark, so here's a really grim story. Everybody, get your hankies out. But so in October, I guess, this guy Hayden Kennedy, who's one of the most prominent, basically one of the best alpinists in the U.S., young, super promising, super talented. He and his girlfriend, who was also a super talented rock climber, went out backcountry skiing out in Montana, and got hit by an avalanche. She got buried. He dug himself out, basically scoured the whole avalanche area trying to find her. Never found her. Realized that she was dead. Basically, love of his life. He hiked back out to town and then killed himself that night as like a grieving, who knows what exactly. And super heavy, totally shook the entire West Coast climbing community because they were both super well loved all over the West Coast, like all these different climbing towns. They were just like big and this, really, really shook. And I mean, a lot of people were really upset with him because, why? I don't know, like why kill yourself over something like that? But and I mean, it is, and they were both friends, and you're like, oh, that's pretty grim. But part of me is like, well, I mean, he made a choice, and he led a very clear, intentional life, and he was a very, very principled climber. He'd done a lot of things in climbing he had a very, very strong ethic about his climbing, and he just lived in a very direct, intentional way. And I'm sort of like, well, he chose to end his life in the exact same, with the same kind of clear vision. And I'm like, well, I mean, like I disagree, and I wouldn't do that, but I'm like, a lot of respect to Hayden. I mean, he played the way he wanted to all the way to the end. I'm like, at least he didn't have regrets when he was old, I don't know.
So your acceptance of other people's path and their choices is pretty high, right? And you find that they've made some choices, whatever. And then do you have that same level of acceptance in your inner experience, your inner dialogue or monologue? Are you self-critical or of yourself and accepting of others, or are you accepting of yourself as well?
Maybe a little bit of both. I'm definitely a little bit more self-critical. It's like, oh, why do you eat those cookies? What's wrong with you? Or if you really cared about climbing, you'd be watching your diet a little bit more. Things like that, or whatever. If you really cared, you'd be training a little bit harder. Or like, oh, you probably should have done your work instead of just mindlessly surfing Instagram on your phone, like zonked out, trying to fall asleep, or whatever else. Definitely a little bit self-critical. But at the same time, like I said, strong goals loosely held. I mean, not that self-critical. Because if I fail on things, I'm like, that's fine as long as I try, and as long as I'm sort of moving forward.
So spending some time in the adventure world and the action, high stakes environments, there's a phrase that happens when I'll talk about some projects that I've been part of, and people will respond. They'll lean back and they'll say, "Why would they do that?" Speaking of you or somebody, like, yeah. Why? I don't understand it. And then there's this unique phrase that pops out right behind it, which is, well, they can't have kids. And then something like, and they can't really love their mom. So I don't get the sense of that for you, but like, how would you respond to that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have kids or family or anything like that, so I mean, I can't speak to that. But I mean, I think that I'm making very clear, intentional choices, and I would think that I will continue to make well-informed decisions, regardless of my family situation. I don't know. I mean, a lot of my friends, other professional climbers that I've done a lot of the big enchainments and things with, do have kids, do have young kids, and it's not as if anything has changed for them. I mean, the goal is always to survive. It's like, we want to live. So it's not like, it's not like that's going to change.
Your mom and dad did something right to groom and raise you to become one of the frontiers of human potential, to really get into such a skillful place that others aren't able or willing to go. And you have a legendary experience relationship with your mom that you take her on a sense that you are going to do or have done. Do I have that close to right?
A little bit, yeah. She started climbing many years ago now, I guess, and we've climbed, a couple cool routes a year.
And what would be the one thought that mom installed or helped to shape for you from a young age that you still carry forward?
I mean, I think my parents definitely instilled a drive for excellence, or to do your best, or to always.
And how did she do that?
Like a nice saying, like good enough isn't. Like that's a nice.
That was good enough. Good enough isn't.
Yeah, good enough isn't. That's That's what you should tell your kids. No, but just a general drive to do your best, try your hardest, to work. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I've never actually worked that much, but I do try very hard as a climber.
You say so. You say you didn't work very much.
In a conventional sense of having a job.
Yeah.
No, I do actually work quite hard as a climber.
Yeah, because there was an insight that you spent a year doing imagery or visualization of El Cap. Is that?
No, probably more, really. I mean, so I first started thinking about free soloing El Cap in 2009, I guess. Basically, the year after I soloed Half Dome, I started thinking, like, all right, El Cap is next, because that's the obvious thing. It's the next bigger, harder objective. And so in 2009, I was like, all right, it's happening. And then I showed up in the valley and looked at it and was like, oh my God, it's not happening. And then each year thereafter, I'd look at it and be like, oh no, not this year. But I was definitely thinking about it sort of in the back of my mind all the time for years and years. And then it wasn't until sort of the year and a half before I actually did it that I stared being more conscientious about it.
And were you structured in seeing those images?
No, I mean, mostly I sort of tried to give myself enough empty time that my mind would just naturally gravitate towards it. For the full month before I actually soloed El Cap, I erased all the social media off my phone, so I couldn't just mindlessly waste time. I'd stopped responding to emails for so long that I stopped getting any emails, which was actually pretty amazing. And so basically I had no demands on my time. And then my girlfriend left for periods of time, and so I was just by myself in my van, which sort of reminded me of the good old days, reminded me of 2006, 2007, when I was desperately single and just all I can do is climb all the time. And so suddenly I had all this free time, which you just wind up sitting there with nothing to do, being like, huh, and then my mind would just naturally go to the things that I needed to think about on El Cap.
Okay.
But
so in our
I find it really hard to intentionally, now I'm going to sit down and visualize for an hour.
That's not how you do
what
it,
I need
yeah.
is just 5 hours in an afternoon with no plan, where I can just lose an hour or two sitting there being like, and then the left hand, and then the right hand, the right hand first, and then the left hand, and then just have some time to think about it. But
would you spend an hour or two in that 5 hour period, or is it blocks of 10 minutes, blocks of 2 minutes? Is it loosely?
Yeah, maybe lots of blocks of 10 or 20 minutes, things like that.
Okay. So that's that's a really unconventional way that most people in the field of performance or sports psychology would consider. They would say, okay, athlete is busy, so let's structure 6, 8, 10, 20 minutes of your time to see you do something extraordinary and also see some really tough spots that you want to get out of. And so that's a completely different model that you just shared.
Huh, I don't know.
That's cool.
I mean, it just comes from being a homeless person living in a van.
Did somebody train you in imagery, or you just figured it out on your own?
Well, I mean, it's only in the last few years that I've even learned all the terms like imagery and visualization and stuff. I mean, I always thought of it as daydreaming or fantasizing, because I mean, a big component of it is just imagining how awesome it would be to be on top, or how terrible it would be to fall off and die, and and then the full spectrum in between, what if I got scared at that one spot? Or what if I thought my foot was going to slip? Should I just trust the foot anyway? Or should I reverse the move and then place it again? Or, all the things that you go through in your mind, trying to do those ahead of time so that when I'm actually up there, I'm not, I don't have some new thought that I'm like, oh, I never considered that. Oh, no.
Okay, so what percentage of the time, if you had to kind of throw a hand grenade to get this right, what percentage of the time are you seeing yourself be exceptional? And being in flow, if you will, or figuring it out? And what percentage are you thinking about all the things that could go wrong and what ifs?
It's probably more than 50% positive, but probably less than 70. Something like that, in the 50, maybe 60-40, 70-30 positive.
Yeah, and so a lot of people...
That's a total hand grenade, I have no idea. I'd have to think about it more, but...
A lot of people say, all I can see is negative images, or they're afraid of seeing negative image because they think that there's going to be some weird programming that's going to take place.
And I do think, I am conscious of that, because you don't want to dwell on, what if the foot slips, what if the foot slips, if the foot slips, I die, if the foot, actually, so on El Cap specifically, at the bottom of the route is low angle slabs, and there was basically one of the things that was the psychologically most difficult section of maybe the whole route for me, all revolved around this one right foot, where I basically there were no handholds at all. It's just a blank. It's imagine walking across sort of a mirror at this angle. So it's not vertical, and so all your weight's on your feet, but your foot is on, I don't even know, something the width of a pencil maybe, which I mean, is an okay size, but it's not that big. And basically you just have to snake your foot over to it and then rock your weight onto it. And so, I mean, your whole life basically depends on your foot staying on this little edge. It's like the size of a pencil. And there's nothing to hold. And so it's not technically that hard. Like the rating in climbing difficulty isn't, cutting edge or anything, but it is very scary to just be like, oh, now my whole life depends on my foot staying on that thing. And that's the type of movement that it would be easy to dwell on and be like, if the foot blows, I die. Like, I don't want to do that. But I'd rehearsed it a ton, and every time I'd done the section no hands, I'd done it various ways. I'd done it, I'd actually done it in this pair of shoes, basically, in this same type of sneaker. And so, I was like, well, I can do that, and then I just did. I don't know.
Okay. I think I've got a little treat. No, sorry, that's a non sequitur. I've got a little
cool.
treat that I think is cool, is that I had a conversation yesterday with Felix Baumgartner and about you. And so Felix Baumgartner, he jumped out of a capsule at 130,000
Out of a spaceship.
Out of a spaceship.
That's cool.
And the first person to break the speed of sound, without a capsule.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy, kids. Don't do that.
And so I said to Felix, I said, if you had one question for Alex, what would it be? And I want to pass that on to you. And so what he said is, what happens at the moment in time when you've run out of skills? You're in a challenging situation, you've run out of skills. What do you do?
I don't know, you pee yourself. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you improvise or you just deal. You just rise to the occasion. I do often think about rising to the occasion because, I mean, a lot of climbing is that sort of adventuring, particularly in the big mountains on trips like going to Antarctica or places like that where you're suddenly doing something that you've never technically done before. You don't exactly know that you can do it, but you just sort of have confidence that you're like, I am a good climber and I will figure this out,
So that's part of your model. Like, I've got skill and I'll figure this out, even when a mistake means that you'll die or be paralyzed.
Oh, I mean, ideally. I mean, sometimes you get into a situation, you're like, I don't want to do this, I'm going home. And you down climb very carefully and then back off.
What percentage of time? So you've heard of YOLO? You only live once. Right?
Dude, YOLO free solo.
That's YOLO for solo.
YOLO free solo.
You've heard of FOMO, fear of missing out?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I think we've got a new one that I've been playing with.
Oh, yeah?
Ready? FOPO, fear of other people's opinions. And so what happens for people when they're on the edge, whatever that is for them, lights are on, public speaking, or whatever it might be, that there's a real fear of what other people might be thinking of me, and that impacts sometimes in negative ways and sometimes in positive ways my thoughts and decisions.
No, I definitely think about that. And I mean, that's part of the reason that soloing has always been so private, because you don't want to be influenced by that kind of stuff.
Right.
And whether that means, like, you don't want any pressure to go up and solo something, you also don't want to feel weird about yourself if you decide to bail. You just don't want any pressure at all. You just want to follow your heart, as cheesy as that sounds, but follow your own motivations.
Follow your what? Heart?
Yeah.
Heart.
But like you follow your own drive and not let anything else affect you.
Because it's a real deal when like an adventure that's funded. Now you've got managers and money and sponsors and other people and a camera crew. And so when you're in that situation, how do you manage your true north and stay pure as opposed to the pressures that are outside of you?
Yeah, I mean, that's always tough. I mean, I think that for me, it's not that hard to just not care, be like, screw it. Like, the camera crew, they do whatever they need to do. The sponsors, like, and I've been lucky that I have very long-term good relationships with all my sponsors, and so it's not like one-off projects where, like, if I don't do this climb, I'm going to get fired. It's more like they sponsor me as an athlete to just go out and do my thing, and they don't really care if I get to the top or not. Or so I don't feel that much direct pressure most of the time. Brilliant. But at a certain point, you're just like, you know what? It's my life. Screw everybody else. Like, they can deal.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, but for a project like Felix Baumgartner jumping out of space, I mean, that's crazy because he's freaking flying up there in a spaceship. Like, I mean, when you're talking about pressure, like, that's some pressure. That's not something where you can fly up and be in your suit and be all ready to jump out of space and then be like, no, let's go back down and chill. Because,
how is that different than yours?
Well, no, because the thing with soloing is that you walking to the base El Cap takes 10 minutes from the road, basically. You stroll over, you look at the wall, and if I had decided not to do it, I would have strolled back to my van and gone back to bed. And there would have been a camera crew on the wall being like, is he coming? Is anything happening? and they were all friends of mine. They'd understand. They didn't necessarily want me to do it because I think they were all sort of personally horrified as well.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know,
there's a window after.
But actually, and let me just add, so I was talking about that move on at the bottom of El Cap with the right foot. So in the fall, 6 months before I soloed it, I'd actually gone up to that move, so I'd soloed the first 500 feet, and basically got to that move, decided I didn't want to do it, didn't trust my foot. I'd had an ankle injury, and my foot was kind of swollen. I couldn't feel my toes. It was dark. I was wearing a headlamp because in the fall, it's just the way the sun and shade. It's just the way it had to be, which was unfortunate. But so basically, I was like, I don't want to be here. This is scary. I'm not into this. And then I grabbed the bolt, which is what you would normally clip your rope into, and then I started cheating by pulling on the bolts. So I was still up there by myself without a rope, but I was sort of pulling on the equipment a little bit, which is officially cheating. But it makes it quite a bit easier and more secure. And so I sort of cheated my way through that section and then just went up a bit higher and then came down some ropes that were fixed on a different part of the wall. And so I did sort of climb, the first 500 feet and then decide that I wasn't into it and come down. But, sometimes you got to make the right call.
You got to know how to say no.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to do this with you really quickly. Can you talk about this word, confidence?
Confidence? Let's talk about confidence, guys. Does that count?
That counts.
Yeah, okay.
How about control?
Precision, tightness. Are we just doing word association, or are we doing in depth?
That's cool too. Yeah, that's good
Okay.
too. Yeah. What did you say to control? What did you say?
I said precision and tightness, but because I think about being in control and climbing, it means your movements are in control. You can place your feet very precisely. You can, you're under control of your body.
And how do you take control of your mind?
Well, sometimes deep breaths. If your mind is actually racing, like something happens and I get very afraid, then I, try to compose myself, take some deep breaths, and just bring it back together, and then, carry on.
How often do you train breathing? Work that way?
Never. It just happens sometimes.
Just happens?
Yeah. I don't know.
Calm.
Calm. I don't know. Just relaxed. Tranquilo. Just I don't know. This is a hard word association.
Your personal philosophy.
YOLO free solo.
YOLO free solo.
No. Personal philosophy. I don't know. Try your best and try to improve. Try my best and try to improve.
Brilliant. How about this word, optimism?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I'm very optimistic in some ways. And like you just said, with visualizing, I definitely visualize positive more than negative, probably. But so far, I've only had positive results, and so maybe that's not optimism. Maybe that's just realism. No, I don't know. Optimism. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, you just think about the world, and I don't know if that's being optimistic or pessimistic or not. You're just seeing how it all plays out.
Mm-hmm. How about trust?
I'm really bad at this game. We shouldn't do this game. I don't know. What do you think about with trust?
Yeah, again. Oh, you like that?
Maybe honesty, just being straight up. I'm very trusting, and I'm also trustworthy. Everything is pretty straight up.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put these down now.
Okay. I just failed. I failed the class. I'm so bummed.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap up, and I want to get to some questions from the audience. And cool. I want to make sure that I ask one a significant question, then a few follow-ons. One is, how do you think about or articulate the concept of mastery?
Whoa. How do I articulate the concept of mastery? Being good at what you do, having a depth of comfort in what you do, that that you're comfortable with any sort of set of circumstances. I think about that with climbing, just broadening the comfort zone, going on adventures, like I was saying, rest day adventures, just little things that always are just a little bit different, a little bit hard in some different way, so that then anytime something happens, you're like, oh yeah, that, like I can deal with that. That to me is a sense of mastery.
Brilliant. Okay, so scale of 1 to 10, and then we're going to do some audience questions. So just like on a scale of 1 to 10, your ability to switch on, to be up, to be on.
To turn on?
Yeah.
Like game face?
Yeah.
7. It's hard to say. Because not that good at, like if I had to suddenly start singing, it would be a 0 and I would flee through the curtain. But for climbing, maybe an 8 or 9.
Switch off. Your ability to switch off, 1 to 10.
To just totally chill.
Yep.
Oh, like a strong 8 at least. Yeah.
Your ability to manage your inner dialogue, 1 to 10.
Probably a solid 8 or something also, maybe.
Your focus when it's dangerous. Your ability to focus when it's dangerous.
Also pretty high. I feel douchey giving myself straight 8s or 9s, but is that all right? Like, okay.
How about your ability to focus when it's boring?
Still pretty high, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, if I have to focus on something, I just will. I almost did a 1,000-piece puzzle straight through the night the other night at my house, which is like, I gave up at 4:30 because I couldn't see the pieces anymore. But I mean, that's kind of the essence of focusing on boring.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I was like, this is stupid, this is a waste of my time, I'm supposed to be climbing tomorrow, but I just wanted to finish the stupid puzzle. But,
External rewards, driven by external rewards, 1 to 10. Money, fame, cars, watches, whatever.
5.
5.
Like a solid. I mean, I definitely am motivated by, I want to make a living, but it seems fine to me. It seems very healthy.
Internal rewards, motivated by internal rewards.
Yeah, maybe a little more. I don't know. I hate to put it. It seems douchey to just give yourself big numbers.
No, I thought. I thought
I'm
you
gonna
were
give myself a 7.
Are you going to give yourself a 10 on anything?
No.
You would not give yourself a 10.
No. If 10 is the edge of the scale, I'm definitely not at the edge of the scale on anything.
On anything.
No.
Nothing.
No.
Not
I'm not
one
gonna.
thing.
If you give 10 perfect, I'm not gonna grade myself perfect in any discipline of anything ever.
Cool thought. Okay. 1 to 10 fear of success.
I don't know, do I, like 2, I don't know. I love being successful. Is that bad?
No.
I don't know.
There's something that happens, though, for folks is that as soon as they're well recognized for the thing that they once loved out of purity, that it can change the game and it can change their relationship. And you'll hear people in the pros all the time talk about now it's a job. And so they're kind of afraid of what the next level
I
of
know what you
success
mean,
could
for
be.
sure.
Yeah.
But climbing is such a big sport that you can just take it in all different directions. I mean, going somewhere like Antarctica is completely different than going up on El Cap. And so for me, I'm sort of lucky that unlike other sports, I can just branch in different directions and try something that's challenging me, try something that's fresh. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to worry about that as much as, say, somebody in basketball or something.
Yeah, got it.
You guys, you're going to ask Kobe when he's here. That's so exciting. You guys get to see Kobe.
Okay, last one before we go to the audience. Street smart or analytical?
Analytical, maybe. I don't really know.
Yeah, cool.
I'll give them both a 3.
Both a 3?
Yeah. That's why I dropped out of school. But,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for the honesty, the vulnerability, the allowing of this conversation to take place, and significant contribution to the potential of what is possible for humans. And so I love being that we shared this conversation and that you're around while all of us are still living. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Just nice chat. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Let's grab some questions.
I think.
Okay, let's grab some questions. Grab up to the microphone and let's hear what the brilliant next generation of thinkers and doers have to say.
Do people just start chatting?
And you can stand up if you want and kind of walk over to them.
Yeah, it's
or
like-
yeah, whatever you want. Please,
Shall we stand?
if you want to.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Alex. Am I allowed
Yeah,
to talk?
let's
Please,
stand
yeah.
and chat. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hit us.
Okay, so I'm a new climber, and I know that there are a lot of people on the climbing team here tonight. Where are you guys at? Anyone? Woo!
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any tips for new climbers, like technical or mental, about like just how to get over the original kind of inability to do things and just get to that place where you're more comfortable with like being on the wall?
I mean, typically for new climbers, that just I say that all new climbers should focus on technique, focus on the technical aspect of climbing, focus on moving more, like just more climbing, just practice. I mean, when I was young, I would spend hours traversing in the gym, just going back and forth on the wall. And on any given day, I'd be like, today I'm going to learn how to do heel hooks, and I would just use only my heels and perch on the holes and just practice. I think that because climbing is always about getting to the top, a lot of people try to get to the top too much, and people don't practice movement necessarily. But certainly as a beginner, I think you have the most to gain by focusing on the fundamentals and think about quiet feet. Don't clump your feet against the wall. Like place your feet carefully on a hold, and then transition your way. It's all very beautiful. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I've got a brief anecdote and then a question.
Yeah.
So I moved to LA to pursue mostly creative endeavors, and then found myself working at a climbing gym. And then we kind of talked about this already a bit about like when climbing becomes a job. I went from just working the gym, then coaching, talking about trying to get some guiding stuff going on. And then all of a sudden my relationship with climbing changed quite a bit. All of a sudden it wasn't just this thing I would go outside to do for personal pleasure. It was like the stakes are a little higher. So my question for you is, we talked a little bit about how money and fame sort of might affect your relationship with this sport. That seems very personal and individual for you, but maybe more like social media, money, has it at all adulterated your relationship with this sport?
So I think that, so for me as a professional climber, I think I'm a little bit lucky. As a coach or working in a gym or being a guide, you're actually climbing for an hourly wage in a way. For me, as a professional, I make my living from coming and doing events or making appearances or doing things that aren't strictly climbing most of the time. Occasionally I film and occasionally I actually climb for a camera or do things like that. But for the most part, my work is actually very separate from my climbing, and my climbing is still very personal. So I think it's actually maybe easier for me to keep it as a personal thing than it is for other people that work in the industry maybe. But I've actually never really had a hard time with it. I think for me the bigger challenge is knowing that if I go into some random climbing gym, everyone's going to be staring at me and I'm going to suck, because I'm not that good at climbing in the gym. And you have all these little kids like just staring at you and you're just falling off easy things, and then they come over to have you sign their chalk bag and you're just like, that's a little embarrassing. But you get over it, I just deal. But all the riffraff back in the seats. No, sorry. No. Sorry. Okay.
Well, I don't know if this is a question he wants, but I'm planning on renting a portaledge in Yosemite for 4 days. No aid, under 5'11". What route would you recommend?
Oh. I'm like, are there any routes in Yosemite that aren't aid climbing that you could free climb at 5'11"?
I don't know. That's why I was hoping.
No, you need to aid climb. If you're going to use a portaledge, you got to be able to aid climb. That's just the way it is. If you aid climb Astroman, you're going to be publicly mocked, I'm just saying. And actually, I've passed a party that was on a portaledge on Astroman, and I was very disappointed. Don't do that. Just climb El Cap, climb the nose. It's like 5'10", a tiny bit of aid climbing here and there. If you climb 5'10" and pull on gear, it's like the nose is an amazing route, and it'll be an amazing adventure. But, okay, cool.
What's your favorite snack to eat while climbing?
I eat a lot of fruit and nuts, basically, like apples and like nut butter, things like that. I don't know, nothing exciting, normal food. But
what advice do you have for getting to the next level? So both, I guess, in life, but also like with climbing. So I'm a big sport climber and like wanting to get up to trad.
Well, I don't even know if that's the next level. Sport climbing and trad climbing are both just climbing. It's just different skills. You just sort of have to practice placing gear and assessing risk and learning about, how you navigate the rock. But I don't know. You tell me how to get. Right now I'm trying a totally different training program that I've never really done before. I've been training in the gym a bunch in an effort to get stronger. I'm basically trying to do the same thing as anybody else. I just want to get better at what I do, and I'm trying new things to get there. It's like, I don't know. You just have to try. But yeah.
Is there anyone doing anything in climbing or any routes or any style of climbing that you just look up and you're just like, no way, that guy's on another level? Because that's what I guess we say when we're looking at you.
I don't know. I look at Alex Megos, Adam Ondra. There are a couple of very high-end sport climbers, some of the strongest physical people in the world. A lot of people look at the stuff that I'm doing, they're like, oh, that's crazy, because they can't imagine the mental side of the climbing. But for me, the mental side has always kind of come naturally, but the physical side is a lot harder. So I look at people who are physically gifted, and I'm like, that's so crazy. How can they do that? I wish I was strong like them. It's just, like the grass is always greener on the other side type of thing. But Alex Megos, I don't know if you've ever, if anyone ever sees him climb in person, it is outrageous. It makes you feel sick. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for coming. It was really inspirational. I kind of have a two-pronged question. First of all, how can climbers get involved with keeping their environment where they climb kind of better, safer, more untouched? And the second question is, how do you think Olympic climbing is going to affect the community?
I'll start with the Olympics just because I think I'm pretty excited about it. For those that don't know, climbing will be in the Olympics in 2020. I will have nothing to do with that because I'm too old and too weak, but I will definitely watch it and it will be amazing. But I think it's cool. I think it's good for the sport. But in terms of protecting the environment or just, I actually don't really think of it protecting the environment around climbing areas. I just think that everybody as individuals should be thinking about what they can do to minimize their environmental harm and, think about lifestyle, think about diet, whatever it takes to do less harm in the world. As climbers, they're the obvious, like, oh, don't litter at the crag, clean things up, don't cut trails and destroy vegetation. But it's like, you should be doing that kind of stuff in normal life too. It's like climbers shouldn't be thinking about that. Everybody should be thinking about that stuff. But.
Hey, so I first found out about you from the Oprah documentary called Belief. And
I think you're the only one that learned about me through Oprah.
Sorry. I was wondering if you could talk about secular humanism and your perspective on death through the lens that this is our only shot at consciousness from our perspective, and how different worldviews play into different views on free climbing.
I'll take my best stab at it. Okay. I don't know. So in the Oprah piece, the Oprah, it was a mini-series about spirituality and belief in humanity. And I was the one token atheist, I think, because I'm pretty sure Oprah's religious, and it was all about human spirituality. And then I was the one guy that's like, and look at this homeless guy that doesn't believe in God. He's crazy. But I do think that the reason they had me on that program was because I did sort of touch on a lot of the same spiritual themes with making the best of your life, living your best life. And I think that I've just approached it through secular humanism, whatever you want to call it. But I think of us all as animals. We're all just biological creatures that are living a life, and then eventually it will end, and that will be the end of us. And so that just gives us a finite amount of time to do our best, to make our mark in the world, or to do whatever we can do. I don't know, it's not particularly spiritual, but I feel like it's very factual. But I don't know. Yeah, moving on.
Hi. So I feel like a huge part of the interviews you've done, from like the brain scans to the question asked, are trying to analyze some aspect of your personality that's allowed you to be so successful. So I guess my question is, do you personally see yourself as different?
No, I think I'm just a normal dude. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. But I can rationally recognize that, yeah, maybe there is some kind of difference, because I've certainly taken a different path than everybody here's still in school for the most part, or they already graduated. So that's, and I was like, oh, I can't do that. And so, yeah, there is some difference, but I'm just a normal guy. The thing with climbing is that I was never gifted, and what I was just talking about, the other question with physical gifts in climbing, climbing has never come super easily to me. I'm not that strong. And the mental side of it, you don't really know what's going on inside anybody else's head, so I just assume that everybody else is the same as me, and I'm like, I wonder why they don't do that stuff. Everybody could if they wanted to. They just don't want to. I don't know. Yeah.
So obviously climbing is like your true passion. Is there any other hobby you have or anything else in life that rivals that level of passion you have for climbing?
No, nothing that even remotely rivals my passion for climbing. I like going skiing, I like going mountain biking, I like, maybe hiking in the mountains and things, but nothing is even remotely close to climbing. But, I like puzzling apparently, but I didn't really think so. But.
I had two questions. My first question was, throughout your free solo climbing career, was there a time that you made a big mistake where you almost thought you died or something, or that you were gonna die, midway through, or?
So I've had a bunch of times where things have happened, where I'm free soloing and I'm grabbing a rock and the rock pulls off or something like that. But those aren't in a way that, so that is quite scary. So something happens, a rock falls off, I maybe open up away from the wall and you're like, whoa, and hold back on. And then, but the thing is that I haven't actually fallen off, and so by the time you grab back on, the whole situation has already resolved itself, and then you're just left being like, whoa, didn't see that coming. And so, things like that have happened maybe a half dozen times, various, or having a crazy animal come out or something unexpected. Yeah, definitely that happens, but.
you usually just wear rock climbing shoes like daily? Or?
Well, these aren't technically climbing shoes. These are approach shoes, but I pretty much wear approach shoes all the time. Yeah. But it does mean that you can climb really well in approach shoes. So at any given time, you're just like, oh, you got to climb something, no problem. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I mean, it's tools of the trade. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Hey, so obviously you can't climb forever. I was wondering like what you have in mind for like after you kind of put it all away.
Well, so climbing actually has greater longevity than most sports because it's pretty easy on your body. So there are a lot of still professional climbers, adventurers that are in their mid-50s, late 50s, that are still going out all the time. And there are a lot of people going climbing all the time into their mid-70s or, or even older, really. But so I'm sure I'll be climbing regularly my entire life. At some point, I'll stop being a professional climber, I'm sure, but that'll just be a natural transition out, I hope, or terrible accident. But.
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, do you have anything else you'd like to pursue after or other than climbing?
Well, so I have a foundation, the Honnold Foundation, that I've been working on environmental projects, and so I can sort of see myself naturally transitioning more into work with the foundation and less high-performance rock climbing. But we'll just see. We'll see what I'm excited about.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
Thank you.
So bad.
All right. Good questions. Good questions. Good questions from the students. It's rare to have you. The last question about what's next. I will let you know that there's a distinguished lecturing position available at the Performance Science Institute at USC. Whenever you drive the van down through Los Angeles, we'd love for you to stop by. And I do think you make it folksy and approachable for something that just really is something difficult to fathom for us. So thanks for bringing your talents and your family and your mother down here to USC. Let's hear it for Alex Honnold. Alex.
Thank you.
Come back anytime.
Yeah, no. That's fun.
All right. That's the end of our program. I don't know where Dr. Fox went. He left. No, he's back there. But thank you all for coming. Please stay in touch with Alex Honnold through Instagram and through... Hey, Glenn. Glenn's back. There he is. But please stay in touch with the Performance Science Institute, with Alex Honnold on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. We'll see you guys in the next couple of weeks. There's a couple other events coming up, Soul Cycle, Riot Games, Kobe Bryant. Have a great week and fight on. Fight on.
Thank you guys.